Okay.
Hi, everybody. Part of the guiding principles.
Hi, Dr. Nick.
One of the things about the Keeler method of dog training that made it so functional as a training methodology for people of any age, whether the dynamic of the dog was small to large or large to small, dog and handler, has to do with leash handling. A lot of people are under the impression that the Keeler method advocates a lot of this, and it does not. What it advocates is control of the leash, enabling the handler to control the dog. Part of the functions of handling the leash is how most people use it. You see a lot of this in dog training. You see a lot of this in dog training, and that's not appropriate. When you handle a leash, it's important to know the functions of all the components. We start out with a 6-foot leash. Now this is moderately longer than a 6-foot leash, but it's been stretched out over the 25 plus years I've owned it. This is not a wrist loop. This is a thumb loop, and it is held either over your thumb with a closed fist, or it is held openly in a closed fist. 2 fingers, like the reins of a horse. The appropriate mechanics look something like this. Your right hand is at your side, your left hand is at your side, at your waist, or somewhere out of the way of the dog. If the leash is correct, you'll know that by the slack in the leash breaking just below your knee. So as you step forward on your left leg, it makes contact. Now, the easiest way to protect your arms from repetitive use injuries is to remember the mechanics of leash holding. Here or here. No other place is acceptable. To make it easy, what I instruct clients to do is to place their thumb in a pocket, in a belt loop, or a waistband. That way you know, one, the tactile sensation is going to give you the indicator of what corrective move you need to make, or to make sure that your hands don't move when you make that corrective action. So it looks a little like this. Heel. No stretching there, demo dog. Okay. Good. Now, stay. Just on the perchance that this dog is going to make an action to the left, my body is what's going to make that corrective action, not my hands. If the dog's going left, stay. Roughly I'm going to turn, or roughly what happens is most people have a tendency to turn or just simply go like this. That's not appropriate. One, we don't want the dog to see the corrective act. All we want to do is implement the corrective act. So if the dog is heading left, all I'm going to do is drop my hand to my side, fix it to my thigh, and simply turn with my left leg into that leash as I make my turn. Good. Nice job. Very nice. I know. You're like, what's going on here, Miss Linda? Huh? Good dog. A lot of times, stay. A lot of times what happens is when you're beginning to teach a dog how to walk on the leash, normally with Keeler trained dogs, they're started on the 15-foot long line. So this becomes a non-issue by the time you start week 2. However, a lot of trainers, especially if you're using an e-collar, have a tendency to go directly to the 6-foot leash in order to implement the heel skill. That's perfectly acceptable. The only change is, if you're using an e-collar, is to transfer your leash from your right hand to your left hand. Same principles apply. But in this instance, what we're going to do is basically teach how to create the corrective turn for a dog that forges ahead. And essentially it's the same thing. If your hands are in the fixed position and you find your dog abandoning you by moving ahead of you, all you're doing is simply allowing that leash to open as you make your corrective turn. Notice my hands move very little as I simply turn away from the dog. So the apex of the pressure comes as the dog is heading away from me and I head away from the dog. I gather my leash and we're back in action. when you want to implement a corrective turn for a dog who crosses in front of you. Very easy to do, very easy to do. Again, your leash is in the exact same position. It doesn't vary very much more than about 4 inches either way, up and down my thigh to my pocket. If a dog is forging, if a dog is trying to cross in front of me, essentially the corrections stay pretty much the same. As we head forward, as he crosses, all right, I'm changing my direction, so for the purpose of the demonstration. But in a situation, it ends up pretty much like this. My left hand, the only time it actually touches the leash, is to simply sweep it back as I make a forward motion across the front of the dog. So he ends up in the correct position. Good, very nice. I know, you're goofy. Same thing for a dog that forges, or for a dog that lags, Stay. For a dog that lags, it's the same thing. Most people have a tendency to just yank on the leash until the dog comes up. That's not appropriate. What I want to do is make my momentum greater than his for the purpose of bringing him up to my speed. So all I'm going to do is drive into that leash to bring him forward. Good. Very nice. And again, my hand doesn't move. The only time I need it to move is to open and the left hand to grab slack after I've made a corrective turn. All right, bud. Good job. Good, okay. He's hard to fool because he's mostly a trained dog, but basically all of these principles are used whether or not the dog is being trained traditionally, leash and collar, or with an e-collar. The only difference with an e-collar, the only change is the left hand, thumb loop or open loop, and reins. So instead of using corrective turns, you're tapping on your collar, heel, tap, 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 that's it. Good, very good. Nothing else changes. It's a lifesaver. It's an elbow saver, it's a shoulder saver, it's a body saver. What you have to practice is keeping those hands still. If you have difficulty, just remember the basic tenets. When you're holding the leash in your right hand, again, you know it's right because the leash breaks just below your knee. All right? If you have difficulty, fix your hands into pockets, belt loops, or waistbands. That way they don't move. And trust me, a dog cannot take this out of your hand if you have the leash gripped correctly and you still have enough flexibility to be able to dump that additional leash in order to make an appropriate corrective turn.